Welcome everybody to another edition of Petersen Automotive Museum Deep Dives. Today we're going to be talking about our 1954 Kaiser Darrin. World War II had a bigger effect on the American automotive industry than some people might realize. Right after the war, American companies resumed building the large, glamorous vehicles that Americans had become used to. But there was also the impact of foreign cars that returning servicemen were bringing back with them. The MGs, the Singers, the Rileys, the Porsches, those kinds of vehicles that spoke to fun and an extroverted nature. Some of the first manufacturers to realize that there was such a market were the manufacturers who built just fiberglass bodies. Now these were people largely from Southern California who decided Americans, who want sports cars don't really need something tiny. What they could do is take an existing vehicle like a Ford or Chevy, throw away the body, and then put on a sexy sports car body. And it just so happened that fiberglass was a brand new material that had been coming into regular use, and a lot of manufacturers did that. One of the manufacturers was Glassbar, and Glassbar ended up morphing into Woodill, which built the Wildfire, which by many accounts was America's first true post-war sports car. Well, Detroit was looking too, and Detroit was saying, now wait a minute, if these guys are building those kinds of sports cars, we better start thinking about it too. We're too big to let this market go. So the first major Detroit manufacturer to take this market seriously was Chevrolet. In January 1953, they introduced at the Motorama a car that they call the Corvette, which is named after a particularly fast Navy ship. The Corvette captured the American interest, and Chevrolet said, we've got to put this in production. And by the end of 1953, the Corvette was in dealer showroom. Well, Chevrolet was not the only major manufacturer that was looking at this market. Ford was looking at it too. But a manufacturer that beat even Ford to the market was Kaiser. Kaiser was a lot smaller than Ford was at the time. It had a lot less institutional inertia to overcome in order to get a sports car into the market. So what they did was they called upon a fellow by the name of Howard Dutch Darrin, who had owned a coach building company in Europe. In fact, two, Hibbert and Darrin and Fernandez and Darrin, and then came to Hollywood and had Darrin of Hollywood. He designed cars for Packard and other special vehicles. He designed also for Studebaker, ultimately. So it was natural for Kaiser to call upon Dutch Darrin, who was already styling their cars, to design a sports car for American driving conditions. So what Darrin did was he decided to imbue a little bit of European exotic flair into it. He gave it a very sculptural shape that in the 1950s was bold in that it did not require a lot of chrome to accentuate its lines. In fact, there's virtually no chrome anywhere on the car with the exception of the bumpers, the wheel covers, and a little bit of badging and maybe a couple of mirrors. It didn't need side strips to bring a visual bubble down to the earth. The car was sleek and spoke to its true purpose on its own. Kaiser at the time chose to build their sports car out of fiberglass because it was a lot less expensive to tool production for. Instead of having to buy $1 million stamping machines to hammer out only a few body panels, it was judged to be a lot more financially viable to do it in fiberglass because it was more labor intensive, but it was less capital intensive, and they could get the bodies in production a lot sooner. Some people in Kaiser management thought that they should call it the Kaiser Darrin Fraser or the Darrin Kaiser Fraser or other names that were kind of awkward combination. But Henry J. Kaiser came in, he said, you know what, we're going to call it the Kaiser Darrin, and that's what it became. Well, they didn't have to go very far to equip it. They had already been building the Henry J. The Henry J was a compact car well ahead of its time that provided the perfect platform, the perfect basis upon which to build a sports car. It was already short, it was lightweight, and it was already adapted to the Kaiser 161 cubic inch F-head engine. Well, one thing that a lot of people didn't expect was an innovation that seems a little bit common today, but in its day was pretty unusual, and that was sliding doors. I think we've heard of doors that open in the, that are hinged at the front, doors that are hinged at the back, doors that are hinged at the roof that open in a gull-wing style. Today we have scissor doors like on Lamborghinis and all different kinds of things. Designers, especially some coach builders in Europe, were building cars with what they call parallel opening doors. Cars whose doors would come out on hinges and then rest in front. But Dutch Darrin said, no, I'm not going to have any of that. I'm not going to have some clumsy parallelogram hinging system that to have to worry about. I'm going to design a car with doors that slide into pockets in the front fenders. There's plenty of wheelbase to do that, so I'm going to do it. So sure enough, he did. But one thing that he didn't consider was ingress and egress, because as difficult as this car looks to get into is as difficult as it actually is. The car was as difficult to get in and out of as it looks, but one thing that it did provide was a talking point. And just like the Chevrolet Corvette and ultimately the Ford Thunderbird and the Nash Healey and other sports cars that were introduced by major manufacturers, they really didn't plan on selling a whole lot of them. The idea behind sports cars like this was to get the public into the showroom, to get mom and dad to look at a sexy Kaiser Darrin, and then they would say, well, you know, but we've got a couple of kids and a couple of dogs, and you know, we like to go shopping and go to the movies every so often. And they could turn them and say, well, how about this marvelous four-door Kaiser over here? Why don't you know? Could you be interested in that? The same way that Chevrolet dealers never expected to sell that many Corvettes, but what they wanted to do was prove their prowess as a progressive automaker and get people to think that if they can imbue a vehicle with the kinds of advanced thinking embodied in their sports cars, then just imagine what my regular everyday family vehicle must be like. This Kaiser Darrin was donated to the Petersen over 20 years ago, and it was a kind of car that we love to accept in the collection because of what it means to automotive history. But this one is especially unique, and it was in entirely original condition when we got it, because the last year that it was registered was 1955. Indeed, when it was given to us, it had a license plate from Guam, dated 1955, that spoke to its prior ownership of an American serviceman. Kaiser wasn't destined to last, so only 435 Kaiser Darrins were ever built. And the ones that remained unsold were actually taken by Kaiser himself and retrofitted with Cadillac engines and sold out of his Sunset Boulevard shop. Darrin of Hollywood, there was a time when you could drive by and see a Darrin, no longer a Kaiser Darrin, but a Darrin for sale in a showroom in Hollywood. Thank you everybody for joining us on another edition of Deep Dives at the Petersen Automotive Museum. We'll see you next time.